Warning: the following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
They say for every light in this world, there is a shadow waiting to reclaim it. We've been told what to believe, what to fear, and exactly where the boundaries of real end. But tonight, we're crossing those lines. From the whispers in the attic to the lights in the desert sky, and the entities that walk among us, we are stepping behind the veil. Transmitting from deep within the mountains of West Virginia, it's time to seek the truth. This is Let's Find Out with Diego. And now, here is your host, Diego the Podcaster.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest has dedicated his life to finding those answers. With over 30 years of experience, he's a medium, a trained demonologist, and the founder of KenTenn Paranormal. He's led more than 500 investigations across the country, armed with degrees in both parapsychology and theology. He's here to tell us about his latest journey and research with what is Resonant Energy Theory. Energy plus emotion equals impact. All this plus more. Please welcome our good friend and returning guest, paranormal investigator and author, Kent Wilson. Kent, my friend, welcome back to Let's Find Out.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Man, it's awesome. I haven't talked to you. I was talking on the pre-interview. It's been about a little over a year. A lot of things have changed for both you and me from the perspective not only on research and the podcast and the books, but you've been doing a lot, my friend. And I was going to say, what have you been doing lately? But that's a very loaded question. So we're going to break it down here for a little bit, if you don't mind. And I believe during the time when I first spoke to you, you were either writing your first book or just finished and published it. And I think it's a great title for a book. And once I say the title, it's going to make perfect sense for those that hear it. Don't buy generic batteries, and it's probably not a demon. That last part, the most important part, because as you know, and people around in the paranormal community, the word demon gets tossed around like the word water or coffee. And I think it's great for the clickbaits and people to watch your stuff. But I think that once you break it down, you really find out it's not a demon. But what I'm going to do right now is, since we didn't talk about it last time, I'm going to bring this up here. So what's going on? When did you release this book?
It came out in March. March is when it went, when it went on Amazon to be about board. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, it's like my memoirs. It starts back from, when I was 5 years old and I saw my first apparition to 12 years old when I went on my first investigation. And, it's probably not demons an important thing because, especially the people in the para-pop culture running around and everything's a demon. And if they actually ever saw a demon, they would piss their pants. I think I'm never going to say there's no such thing as a demon. I'm a trained demonologist under, Bishop Law. So that'd be kind of hypocritical for me to say that. But demons are less than 1% of all paranormal cases. People have, a demon, an actual demon is non-human. It's never been human, and it's a powerful entity that you don't want to mess with, So that's why it's important. And of course, they don't buy generic batteries. We know how investigations drain batteries. So why use the Amazon battery and, at least get an Energizer,
Yeah. What is it? The one with the bunny, right? Keeps on going, or doesn't? Whatever the commercial from the '80s it was with the rabbit. So it's a very serious title once you break it down. When you open the book, and I know it's talking about your memoirs and your information about maybe your investigations and things that you saw when you were young up until now. When did you decide to write this book? What was a good time to get this done?
Well, so the reason I wrote a book was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. we kept investigating, we kept collaborating with this team out of Paris, Tennessee area. And every time we collaborated with them, they were like, Kent, you need to write a book. Kent, you need to write a book. Well, my response was, I don't even read books. Why do I want to write a book? And then, but eventually I decided to write a book. And once I started writing it, it basically wrote itself, because one thing I was told was to make sure that when I write my book, to make sure my personality's in it, because my personality is why everybody's drawn to me. If they're drawn to me, I don't know. I consider myself a nobody, you know that, Diego. So, yeah. So I was trying to make sure my personality was in there. So I sat down there and I wrote it. And Aaron G. Thompson, my good friend, most people know Aaron G. from 28 Days Haunted, but he's my friend. He actually wrote the preface for the book, and it was so that meant a lot. His words were really nice. One line, and I'm going to paraphrase here, so I apologize there if I make your words sound bad. But he basically said that that while mine and his path had similar things, this path was mine, and and there was a lot to learn from it. So that meant a lot, and that's pretty much what. So this is my first book. I've already got my next two planned, and so it's kind of a series. The first one was kind of an introduction to me, and and the second one that I'm working on now, like we mentioned, when we was talking before we went live, it's actually my it's my passion thing, because I obviously with having degrees in theology, I think people realize that to me, Christianity and the paranormal field are intertwined. You can't separate them. Some people try to separate them. I don't think you can. I look at my gifts. My medium abilities, whatever term you want to use. I call them my gifts. I consider them gifts from God, and He wants me to use them to help people. So that echoes my thing. So growing up in not only the Bible Belt, but like the heart of the Bible Belt. I was told at 12 years old at St. Francis Hospital. I was there visiting my grandmother, my Mimo, as I call her. I was there visiting her because she just had a stroke. Well, I was in the lobby trying to buy a Pepsi Free. So that shows you how long ago this was. Pepsi Free is the only Pepsi product I ever liked. So I was trying to buy a red can Pepsi Free at the vending machine. And this 60-some-odd-year-old lady that looked like Dale Carter from Give Me a Break walks up to me. She walks up to me and she tells me that she's like, you're going to hell and you're a tool of the devil. I'm like, okay, nice to meet you too. And so that kind of started my clash between Christianity and paranormal. And so it became a lifelong journey, So that the title was always kind of in the back of my mind, which the title, for the people out there wondering what I'm talking about, the title is Hold On, You're a Christian and a Paranormal Investigator? How does that work? Well, so that question was always in the back of my mind, but the incident that actually gave it its title was last year. I was a featured guest at a Smoky Mountain Terror, and I don't fanboy. I don't really care about all that stuff, but there was two guests there that I did want to meet. One was Kane Holder, Jason Friday the 13th, and then the other one was Heather Donahue, from the Blair Ridge Project. So we had downtime because it was a lunch break, so they had the doors locked, so we could, all the featured guests, and could get some to eat. And so me and Heather had been talking for like 20, 30 minutes, and beyond, just friendly, we developed an actual friendship. Well, her line was starting to back up, so I excused myself back to my table. And when I went back to my table, she noticed my tattoo, born again tattoo, and so she was like, "Hold on, kid." She's like, "Hold on." I was like, "Yes." She's like, "So you're a Christian and a paranormal investigator? How does that work?" So that became the title of the book. And I even sent her a message like a month ago and told her that I was using that as the title of the book. And she's like, "That's wonderful." She's like, I want to read it. So I was like,
Inspiration can come from anywhere, and that's a good title for the book. And it's a fair question for those who are not, I guess, in the circles we run around with. It's pretty common, but for the general public, sometimes they can't put two and two together like that because they feel it might be a danger of mixing the two, which there really isn't. But let me walk back a little bit with the first book because one of the questions I was going to ask you is it's kind of a twofold question. What was the reaction when you released that book, both on the Christian side and on the secular side?
so from the secular side, it was a very positive reaction. The Christian side, especially my close Christian friends, it was still kind of a mixed reaction. You know, thanks to the para-pop culture, as I call it, we can openly talk about it more than we could back in the 90s and 80s. I even mentioned in my book, back in the first book, back in the 80s and 90s, if I mentioned, I was a paranormal investigator, I was judged. Now I can be at Walmart and be wearing my KenTenn Paranormal shirt or, whatever. And now they'll come up to me and they're like, "Oh, you mean like ghost hunters?" And then they're like, "My grandmother's house is haunted. I'm telling you." So that perspective has changed. But, there's still some judgment there, and I actually got into a heated discussion. It was the argument because I knew the facts. But a heated discussion with a good friend of mine who is a Baptist pastor. He kept saying this and this and this, and I was like, hold on, before we continue, I want to make sure I'm going to probably make you cry, and I'm going to make you question everything you've ever believed in. So do you want to continue this conversation? And and so it's interesting because the first thing I say to anybody who tries to tell me that paranormal research is against the Bible, you have the Christians try to tell you, "Oh, the Bible doesn't say anything about ghosts, blah blah blah," and I'm like, okay, so let's take the Bible. I was like, let's take the Bible and discuss this. I'm like, so let's talk about Jesus. We all know who Jesus is, right? Our Messiah, Son of God. So there's two instances of the Bible, not one, but two, where Jesus identifies himself as "I am not a ghost." That was his specific words. So if there was no such thing as ghost, why would he say "I'm not a ghost"? He could have said "I'm not a Sasquatch." He could have said "I'm not Batman," but he specifically said "I'm not a ghost." And those two instances are important because the first one, if you remember, with Matthew and Luke, when he was walking on the water and he calmed the storms, the disciples were scared because they thought it was a ghost. And Jesus replied, "I'm not a ghost." The second time is even more important because the second time was after his resurrection. So we're talking about the third day he resurrects and he goes and sees the disciples. So he goes and sees the disciples. He meets Doubting Thomas and everybody. And when he gets there, he says, he says, "I am not a ghost. A ghost is not made of flesh and blood, as you see I am." So that's a very important instance and a very important. It's in red in the Bible, people. So so you can't have it both ways. If the Bible is the Word of God and it's in red, which means Jesus said it, it has to be. So that's the reason it's always been a passion thing of mine.
And the fact that he used the terminology of ghost, he could have used anything else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, he could have used anything else. Right? And then if you want to enter demons into the picture, uh, if people remember back, Jesus actually encountered a demon when he was escaping from the crowd, and he found a crazy guy wandering the cemetery, and he asked the guy what his name was, and the guy said, "My name is Legion, because I am many." And then he cast out the demons into the pigs, and they all ran off the cliff. So again, Jesus encountered a demon. You can't have it both ways. And then another interesting story from the Bible that I like is, if you remember, there was a Jewish rabbi who tried to use Jesus' name to cast out a demon. And the demon looked at him and said, "I know Jesus and I know Paul, but who are you?" So, you can't just say Jesus' name and it worked. You have to actually believe. So, you know, so, but a lot of Christians don't want to talk about that. They have their opinion, what they were always told, and when you try to present facts to them from the Bible, they're like, "Oh, that's not." I'm like, "Whatever." I'm like, I was like, maybe I'm just crazy, but I mean, I was like, I have 2 degrees in theology. I study the translations of the Bible. I study Latin. So I believe I can read the Bible pretty good.
No, I think you're more perfectly qualified, at least more than me, of course. But it's one of those interesting things where, and I'm glad you brought that up about I know Jesus, I know Paul, but who are you? It's almost for those that perhaps go out there willy nilly and try to maybe cast out a demon or get involved in that kind of work where you're not fully trained or fully rooted in faith or in scripture. It kind of serves as a warning. Instead of you going out there messing around, just using Jesus' name like it's like a little magic name and everything will be cast out at okay, but not so fast. That's not how this works.
It is a warning, and I tell people all the time, not just the demonic activity, but any kind of activity. If you don't know what you're doing, leave it alone. The paranormal field is not a vacation. It's not a joke. You can make a situation worse. My team, KenTenn Paranormal, we still do residential investigations. A lot of people don't anymore, but we still do residential investigations, and that's my passion. Because in my opinion, $2 will buy you a Coke. But in my opinion, if you're not in the field to help people, you're in the field for the wrong reason. So we still do residential cases. And I stress to people all the time, in a residential setting, if you go in there and you don't know what you're doing, you're going to make the situation worse. And then if you go in there and all of a sudden, oh, it's a demon, and it's not, and, you're going to make the situation worse. Like a case that I really know, because I had to end up helping out the lady. There was this 83-year-old lady in Memphis, Tennessee, right? She had this other team, pretty big name team. I'm not going to mention it but this pretty big team who's more worried about being famous than actually helping. They went down there and they told this 83-year-old lady that she had 3 portals in her house and 5 demons, and there was nothing they could do about it. How do I know this? Because this 83-year-old lady hit me up on my podcast, and she kept hitting me questions. I was like, I want to help you, but hit me up after the podcast. I'll get you some help. But yeah, you can't do that. I mean, why would you tell the 83-year-old lady that, especially if it's a lie, and it was a lie? There's no purpose to that. You're going to scare them for no reason. I mean, honestly, 83-year-old lady, tell her you have 3 portals or 5 demons, you could give a lady a heart attack. That's irresponsible.
It is
so
very. Well,
so that's why KenTenn Paranormal's our slogan is investigate responsibly. It's like people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, that means I'm not telling you how to investigate because there's no rule book. But what I'm telling you is, have a have a compass to tell you what's ethical or not. Have an ethical compass. So I mean, could I fake stuff? Yes. Could I scream demon every 10 minutes? Yes. Could I provoke? Yes. But should I? No.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it means to me.
Well, I know you talked about this team, and we're not going to mention their name. I would love to know. I don't want to know. That's fine. Whoa. I'm gonna tread very carefully on this one because these guys did some tomfoolery when it came to this nice lady, 83-year-old lady. Last thing you want to do is get her all worked up and in her last years of life, and then she's home alone, scared the whole time. What happened to this team? Were they called out on this? Did somebody call them on it, saying you guys are just phony?
So this team is interesting to me because, as you know, I am the guy who helps out everybody. Especially if you're breaking into the field, especially if you're in my area, I'm going to help you with everything I got. So when they first broke into the field, I was helping them, and they were also the founder, whatever you want to call him. He was also an Army veteran and a combat medic like me, so that made it even closer to my heart. So I was helping him when he first got here. Where it quickly became obvious that he was more worried about trying to be a TV personality than he was being an actual investigator. So he's still out there, but I will say that everything comes full circle. There's locations now that he's banned from because of provoking and other things, and I'm talking about like some pretty big places like the Glen House, the Cape Girardeau, and so yeah, I'm not judge or jury. That's not my job, and I'm not going to call out anybody until you make it personal. Like there's a big duo that right now, probably the biggest names in the field right now, and I had no problem with them until I went on several investigations in 2025, and I was told that I was no longer allowed to go live, and I was no longer allowed to release my videos until they were approved by the locations, specifically because of these two people. And so then I have a problem. So to me, they're the Spice Girls of the paranormal film.
Wow, that's an interesting vision to have because when my sister was growing up, she was very young. She loved Spice Girls, so now the song's in my head thanks to you with that. But but I understand, and it's gonna be one of those. It might get me in trouble. What I'm going to say, I'm not trying to, but I noticed that there's a lot of focus with several paranormal groups on Facebook. At least I can speak of for Facebook, where they're more concerned about getting followers, but I'm not seeing much investigating going on. And I don't know if they're using this as a vehicle, as you said, try to go viral, become internet stars or something. But that's kind of how you know if that's more important than your research. I think we know where they're going.
Yeah, I mean, social media is both a blessing and a curse. I mean, I'm blessed that KenTenn Paranormal is closing in on 5,000 followers, but I post educational and investigation stuff on there. I don't post all that other stuff. There's one team that I actually are friends with. Yeah, I go to his page and he's talking about smoking weed and all this other stuff. I'm like, that's not what your paranormal page is for. If you want to put that on your personal page, more power to you. But that's, the paranormal page should be about paranormal. It should be about, to me, the goal for every paranormal investigator should be to find that breakthrough piece of evidence, not to self-promote, not to talk about smoking weed, nothing like that. It's about helping other teams, para unity. I hate that word because It doesn't exist, mainly because there's no actual definition. But it's about helping each other out. It's about finding that breakthrough evidence. It's about, you know, leaving the field better than it was when you came into it. And that's my goal. And I'm going to keep investigating as long as I can hold a spirit box in my hand. And yes, I do have the Sam and Kobe spirit box. And no, I don't like Sam and Kobe, but the spirit box is actually a good tool. I actually do like it. It's got a temperature read on there and all that stuff. So it's actually my backup spirit box, but it's actually pretty good.
Well, let me ask you this: you don't have cheap batteries in that thing, do you?
Nope, I have Energizer.
No, man, I just had to get that in there. You set me up pretty well. There you go. The proof is in the pudding
Commercial,
right there.
Energizer commercial. I'm telling you, I get these from Ollie's, the Ollie's discount store.
We have one down
there. Yeah. 24 of them for $7.
I spent a lot of money in that store. I just spent like $150 the other day. It's pretty easy to do.
I go in there to get my coffee pods, the pods, and I always come out spending $150, $200. I'm like, how's that happen?
Well, that's where the savings are. No, but no, but it's interesting. No, I was just there the other day, which is funny. But now, talking about, you say you still do residentials, but that practice doesn't seem to happen as much as it used to. I've seen a lot of things now where people are actually going. They're going to these locations, but they're paying an exorbitant amount of money to go investigate. And like me, a guy like me would think about. I'm not as experienced as you as investigator. I'm not an investigator. I'm more of a question asker to those who actually are going out there. So I'm guessing I'm more of a researcher, not an investigator. So that's the distinction right there. Where am I going with this? I got lost in the sauce. Aha. I've noticed that locations are popping up every once in a while, and they'll say, investigate here, X amount of dollars. And I don't know if the owners of some of these locations are legit or not, but they seem to be making a pretty decent, I'll say, side hustle money, leasing these buildings out to people to come and investigate. Is this like a trend now that's happening? Because we know there's locations that are actually having what I call activity, and there are some that just pop up and say, I've never heard of this place.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of the haunted locations that seem to be popping up now. I think is more of a money grab than actual. I don't like to use the word haunted anyway, as we know. I use the word active. So if I go into a location that's active, yes. But I think a lot of these ones that pop up now, blah blah blah. No, they're just trying to get money. And that's what makes it interesting with doing residentials nowadays. Sometimes you go in and you do a residential, and we have a procedure that we do if we do a residential. There's a step to it. There's a phone interview. There's a person interview. There's a contract signing. There's all that. So when we go into do a residential, I'm there to help the people to give them answers, and I tell them from the beginning, it may be paranormal, it may not be paranormal. I may get nothing. If I get nothing, I'm going to tell you I get nothing. If you actually get clients that get disappointed because they don't have a demon, because they wouldn't have a demon so they can get on TV.
No, you don't want that in your house.
No, and and that's what's wrong. That's one of the reasons a lot of teams don't do residential anymore. And the other reason is, unfortunately, the fact is, at least 50% of residential cases are more mental, more psychological than they are paranormal. So.
And that's good in a way, because now you can pretty much decide: are we going to be doing a little extra on the spiritual side, or does this person need medical attention?
Yep, and and that's the that's like our interview process. Our questionnaire that we have. The questions are not what's your favorite color or anything. They're in-depth questions. They're what's your what's your religion, what's your family's religious background, is there any drug use, any alcohol use, any mental health history. We have to deal with that because I'm putting my team in danger. So I have to know all the facts, and if I'm lied to, I just leave. And and we take it seriously. I mean, I carry insurance on my team, and everything. So it's not like they say there's no professionals in the paranormal field. That's not true. There's lots of professionals in the paranormal field because the professional just means they get paid for it. 98% of the professionals are full of shit, but they're all professionals. I also don't know if I agree with people all the time say there's no such thing as experts in the field. I don't know if I agree with that, and I say that because I have a good friend, Robert Murphy, Elite Paranormal Society. He's an equipment maker and all this stuff. I had him on my show, and he pointed this out to me. He's like, Ken, I'm not going to try to change your mind. Just think about this from a rational standpoint. He's like, in every other profession in the world, if you have experience, if you have education, you're an expert. Whether it's baseball, whether it's medical field, whatever. So why is it different in the paranormal field? And that's a good point. I'm still not comfortable with calling myself an expert, but it's still a good point.
You know, thinking about it from that perspective, it kind of does make sense. I think it's because it could be a couple things. Some people might experience jealousy, or two, the person who we can title them an expert, maybe it goes to their head and they start thinking they're a little more important than they really are.
Well, we know that won't happen to me because I still consider myself a nobody. So,
Oh no, we're the same here, man. It's but no, you are somebody. People say very nice things about you, so don't sell yourself short on that. And I know, I mean, it's been a while since I've talked to you. I know you've probably done a lot of investigating since then. If without disclosing, I mean, you don't want to talk about naming names or what's the last location recently you've been at?
that's the location I went to before my knee surgery. I actually went to the historic Rosemont in Gatlin, Tennessee, uh, and it's a newer location on the paranormal spotlight map or whatever. But it was really interesting. It's got a lot of history, and uh, I made the mistake of investigating it on the Saturday before Easter, though. Uh, so my investigation got cut about 2 hours short. So they could get up for Easter the next morning. And while we were doing the walkthrough, while we were doing the guide, they was giving us the history of stuff. I caught a apparition during the walkthrough. So that was interesting. Because sometimes you can go hours with you can go a whole investigation and not catch anything. I caught something within the first 15 minutes, so that was cool.
And that's not very common though.
No, it's not very common. Yeah, I like to tell people that real and paranormal investigation is not like you see on TV. There's not activity all the time, and I tell them it's a lot like fishing. You can go hours and hours without getting a bite, but if you get something, it makes your day. But you may not get anything, and that was a good investigation because we were actually collaborating with Outlaw Paranormal, Jimmy and Jeff Fricker. I'm good friends with them. Interesting enough, my team lead is actually leaving me for Outlaw Paranormal because she's actually marrying Jeff. They met last year at Smoky Mountain Terror when we were down there. They met there and they've been together ever since. So they're actually getting married this year. So that's just a cool side story.
Well, congratulations to them. It's a beautiful thing that's happening. So with these long investigations, like you said, if you're happening within the first 15 minutes, we can talk about hours, 8, 12 hours, days, weeks, perhaps. Is that one thing that I started thinking about as you're saying this? And I might be completely wrong. I am a lot. Perhaps that's why there are some people who are better well known like to provoke spirits, maybe as a shortcut to get some sort of activity on film.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And I am not, like I said, I can't tell you how to investigate. There's no rule books, but so uh, KenTenn does have rules, and we do orientation. And you have to sign the paper, and one of the things is no provoking. So the way I explain provoking to people. First of all, provoking is about intent. I understand that there's some locations where you have to be more harsh. Like you can't go to Stony Brushy Mountain Penitentiary and be like, "Oh, please come talk to me." That's not going to work there. So I use that as an example because that's intent. So you may have to say, "Come talk to me. Talk to me now." That's not necessarily provoking. Provoking is about intent. So if your intent is to piss off the spirit or to get a reaction, that's when it becomes provoking. And this is what I tell everybody. So why am I anti-provoking? Because I wouldn't come to your house screaming at you and expect a positive response. So why the hell would I do it with a ghost when I don't know how powerful they are or anything else? Why would I do that? That's irresponsible.
It is, and you've probably seen a lot of that.
I have seen a lot of that, and I've seen a lot of people scratched and stuff thrown at them, and they're like, blah blah blah. I'm like, well, this diagnose why this happened. Let's break this down for a minute.
Yeah, let's rewind the film and see exactly what you did to deserve what you got.
Yeah, we're trespassing on their place. They were there before we were. So to me, it's all about respect. You got to respect the location. You got to respect the land. You got to respect the living. You got to respect the living impaired. You got that's what I call them, the dead, the living impaired. So you got to respect everybody. And I understand that sometimes we are dealing with the dark entity, a malicious entity, and it may be hard to be respectful to them, but you still have to try. It's like the old saying, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar.
You attract more bees with honey, that's what they say.
Yep.
Yeah. See, we come from the same era. I know exactly what you're talking about. So the sayings come straight to my heart there. So I know what's happening there. Now, you probably have hundreds or thousands of hours worth of film saved somewhere. And going backwards, you probably have it in VHS. You probably have it burned in a CD. You have them on what is it called? Well, on your hard drives, of course, portable hard drives or on your computer. Now, what's been some of the most interesting footage have you caught that perhaps you've gone through the film a few times, but then you pause it? No way! How did I miss that? Is there something memorable that you've caught?
So my current favorite experience, I have two that I like to share. One happened at Octagon Hall in Franklin, Kentucky, and we were there investigating, and we were actually doing a basic EVP session in the basement, in where they turned into the family library, and then we were just doing a basic EVP session, and something told me to look up, and when I looked up, I saw an apparition of like an 8-year-old girl. Usually apparition's just there and then it disappears. This apparition was pacing back and forth in front of the stairs, and I actually caught it on video for 38 seconds. And
It's a long time.
It was a really long time, and I tried to debunk it. That's the first thing I did. I got up from the EVP session immediately. I started turning on lights. I started walking the perimeter, seeing maybe it was call lights hitting the. But this is 2:00 in the morning in the middle of nowhere in Franklin, Kentucky. There ain't no call lights, and the way the building's designed, it's designed as an octagon. Nothing's going to reflect that way. I couldn't disprove it. So it's still one of my favorite pieces of evidence. You can actually go on my TikTok, on KenTenn Paranormal's TikTok page, and you can watch the video. Or you can go on our YouTube page and watch the full highlights of the investigation, which is the way you want to do it. Either way, like us and follow us. But and then the other one I like to tell is I always do a birthday investigation every year. My birthday's in January, so sometimes it's interesting because there's a lot of snow out there. In 2025, my birthday investigation was at the mysterious Monroe House in Indiana. So my birthday is actually January 19th. So the investigation was on January the 18th because that's a Saturday. So at midnight, when it officially became January 19th, I decided to do a solo session in the basement because the basements were, the demonic, malicious spirit is. So I'm down there and I got my Apple box and I got my Paratech and I will video in it, spirit box, I got all that stuff. So I just start talking to the spirit. And, the reason I listed all the equipment I had is because I like when I have multiple pieces of equipment that agree with each other. That's when I might have something. A REM pod going off may just be a REM pod going off. But if you have a REM pod going off and you have a spirit bear going off, you might have something. So anyway, so I'm down in the basement and I'm talking to the spirit, and I'm like, did you die here? Just a simple question. And the Apple box said yes. Okay. So I was like, okay, did you die in the house? Because at Anderson, at the Monroe House, that's an important question because I really don't know why it's active. I don't know if it's the property. There's theories, but I don't really know. So I was like, did you die in the house? And it said yes. I was like, okay. I was like, thank you for that. Let's talk about how you died. I'm like, did you die? Were you physically killed? Were you beat to death, strangled? So then it said no. I was like, okay. I was like, were you killed by a weapon? Were you stabbed, shot, beat with a bat? It said no. I was like, okay. I was like, okay, I'm a little bit confused here now. I'm like, you said you died in the house. Yes. But you wasn't beat to death or physically killed. Yes. I'm like, okay, so let's try this a different way then. I'm like, can you tell me how you died? And then on the Paratech, I got fire. And I thought that was interesting because I never mentioned fire. But if you know the history of the Monroe House, there was multiple fires. So I like that piece of evidence too. And then, one that I like to tell people about too is the Anderson Hotel in Kentucky. You can't investigate anymore, but it became famous because it was on a TV show back in 2013, and they claimed that the ghost there bites you, and I wanted like Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho has been there, it was, the first thing I'd like to point out with that location is, to me, the first thing I have to point out is it's called the Anderson Hotel. But we're not talking about like a Hilton or even a Motel 6. We're talking about a transit hotel. For the people who don't know what a transit hotel is, that's a hotel where like construction workers come and stay at, people without a home come to stay at, drug addicts come to stay at, that kind of place. So that's the first thing people have to understand. The second thing people have to understand, they wanted it violently hot. And I say this because you go in and there's 5 verified deaths there, whether it's by suicide, murder, whatever. There's 5 verified deaths there. And when I verify a death, I do it through coroner's reports, police reports, and newspapers. I don't just take the person telling me word for fact. I actually research it. So of the 5 verified deaths there, they still have 3 bloodstained mattresses. Then they have a bloodstained bathtub, and then they have the other room. The guy lived there, and he's actually a malicious spirit. He lived there, and he ran prostitutes in and out of the hotel, and he lived there. And he drank himself to the point that he hung himself in the closet, and all of his liquor bottles are there. And they encourage you to bring him a liquor bottle, bring him a bottle of liquor. We did not do that, so provoking. So
no, yeah, it's like gifting to a Bigfoot in the forest, but
Yeah.
you bring in booze to a ghost.
So and then while it was shut down, because I got shut down for 4 years for being violently haunted, they decided to turn it into a haunted attraction, like a haunted house. Which I get that you have to make money. Well, they decided it'd be cool if they painted a voodoo symbol on the wall. But they painted it without researching it. They just picked one that looked cool. Where the one that they painted on the wall opens up the gates of hell. So I'm like, what are you people doing? So I did actually experience the bite there. I got a tattoo of it on my leg, so it's always permanently with me. It did not feel like a bite. It felt like a really deep Indian burn, like you used to get in elementary school.
Yep.
It felt like a really deep Indian burn. But when we got back to our base, and we could see it, it looked like a double bite. And I actually got it tattooed on me. And like I said, so it's always with me. And then the story was confirmed to me by Daryl Munson, from Ghost Hunters, when he was on my podcast, because he had been there too. So we were talking about it, and he said the exact same thing happened to one of my crew members. He's like, Indian burn on his calf. He's like he left. He never came back. And interesting. Is it paranormal? It's not normal, so therefore it's paranormal.
I think it meets every definition of paranormal, especially after what you just said there in that home. And no, I mean, it's. I'm sure you're not the only person that has a story like that from there. You just mentioned somebody that you knew that had such a experience as well. Now, I know we're coming up on the hour, and I know that.
Yeah, I saw that.
No, and that's fine. We're here because something very interesting. I want to bring it up right now because during the pre-interview, we touched on it. I'm very interested in this. So let's talk about your working theory. What is resonant energy theory? And
All right.
Energy plus emotion equals impact.
So this theory has been on my mind for a long time because, we have activity in cemeteries. We have haunted objects, and there's no rational reason for them to have spirits. No, I mean, a cemetery, nobody died there, nobody lived there, so why would they be there? An object does have a soul, so it can't be possessed or haunted. So why is there activity there? So my theory kind of started. I kind of took a bunch of different older theories and combined them and then further them. Starting with stone tape theory, residual haunting theory, and other stuff. So the theory, the easiest way to explain the theory, I like to use like a haunted door because that's like a hot button subject right now in the paranormal field. So you take a haunted door, you take a doll. A doll is usually a kid's best friend, especially a girl's best friend. That's her best friend when she's little. So she has this doll, especially if she's sick. So she has this doll, and she tells this doll all of her secrets. She tells this doll how much she loves her. She spends time with this doll. So there's a transfer of energy, right? You have this energy transfer. So eventually there becomes so much energy. So basically the question that resonant energy theory is asking is at what point does that energy become so much energy, so much that it becomes an entity of its own? And that's the main thing that separates resonant energy theory from residual haunting theory. Because for the people who don't know what a residual haunting is, I describe a residual haunting as a glitch in the matrix. A glitch in the matrix, a video loop that just keeps playing. That's what residual haunting is. So there's no actual intelligent interaction, with the resonant energy theory. The energy has become an entity of its own. So you can interact with it, and it seems intelligent because whoever's energy was poured into that, it has their emotions, it has their thoughts. That's especially true, like a cemetery, because at a cemetery, nobody, like I said, nobody lived there, nobody died there. There's no reason for it to be there. So the families go to the cemeteries. The families go to cemeteries. They grieve, they celebrate, they share stories. So all that energy, all that emotion pours into it, becomes an entity of its own, and of course it retains the memories of whoever it was told. So that's how you get mom over there. Oh, I know, I talked to my son Billy. No, you didn't talk to Billy, but you talked to an entity that can impersonate Billy. So that's what we are, Resonant Energy Theory.
So in a way, so if we're talking about dolls or any kind of object, is there a particular type of object that would be easier to be inhabited by something, or call it like a man-made ghost? Because if you're putting that energy towards this object, it might take life of its own. So is there any preferred types that work best?
Well, I mean, there's things that absorb energy, like limestone can absorb energy, water, So, if you talk about like a location having an unknown spirit, that can be because the energy was absorbed in, and then, like I said, most of the time, it's just somebody's favorite object. Um, Doors are most common because doors are the most common kids' favorite object. But I've seen hats. Somebody's favorite hat, so they're still there. My wife's uncle was a security guard at Brushy State Penitentiary. He was actually the security guard for the guy that killed King. And so maybe I got one of his shirts. Maybe there's energy attached to his shirt from all that. Anything can actually be a conduit. I'm not going to say a portal because no, but it can be a conduit. It's just, the key is not the object. The key is how important it was to the person it belonged to, how much emotion, how much energy they put in there.
Do you own any such items in your home?
I own some. I actually own one of Uncle Terry's shirts, like I said, and then I have the strange. I think it's strange. I like it though. The strange collection of bricks from the locations I've been to. I got a brick from Waverly Hills. I got a brick from Bobby Mackey's. I got a brick from Brushy. I got a brick. I try to get one from everywhere I go. So, and then my favorite brick is actually from not a famous place at all. It's actually from a place that was destroyed by the tornado that came through here 5 years ago. But it was the oldest building in the county and the oldest known haunted county. And where's the whole hotel. That's my favorite one.
And by having these items around your area, has there been any activity that can attribute to it? Oh, there's one.
That's the one for the whole hotel. Yeah, so that one is kind of odd because, like we were talking about off the camera, so they tore down the building because it couldn't be fixed. So, but where did the energy go? So when I got that brick and I brought it home, I felt the presence of a lost soul, like a wandering soul that didn't have a home anymore. And that's the sad fact. where do they go? So I actually coached the spirit into going back to the land. I was like, the brick wasn't your home, the land was your home. So, and that's just like Bobby Mackey's. I mean, I'm not a big Bobby Mackey's person. To me, it's the most overrated place there was. But that's just another point. But that's just like, they tore down Bobby Mackey's as opposed to Bobby Mackey's was a portal to hell. So if it was a portal to hell, where the hell did the demons go?
I have no answer for that because I wouldn't know how to answer it.
That's what I'm saying. So they're either still with the land or they were never there to begin with. Those are your two options.
I mean, or here's the third option: they're waiting for some poor schmuck to rebuild something on it, and then.
So I'm not getting into the whole Bobby Mackey thing, but I'm telling you, there was an article written probably a decade ago, a published article that actually talked about the substance and alcohol abuse problems of the owner at Bobby Mackey's, and about him inventing about him believing in it being haunted so much that that's why it became haunted, which is an interesting theory. I mean, that's kind of like Resonant Energy Theory. You believe in something so much, you transfer energy. So eventually, I'm not saying that can make demons. Come on out. I mean, those are actually rules of demons, people. These little teenagers running around in their tight pants, 20-year-olds running around in their tight jeans, if they actually ever saw a demon, would piss themselves. There's actual rules of demons. So stop saying demon. I'm done.
You have to buy a spare pair of jeans after you see one, for one of two reasons. We'll go into that some other day. But my friend, this has been entertaining as always. Now, for the magic question, for our good friends, listeners of Let's Find Out, they want to learn more about you, your investigations, your book, your theory, and the book that's coming out soon. Where can they go find out?
So to find out about KenTenn Paranormal, you can follow KenTenn Paranormal on Facebook, TikTok, or YouTube. You can like my personal page, Kent Wilson, to keep up with my books, my appearances, my Resonant Energy Theories updates. You can contact my agent if you want me to come be at your event. The podcast, you can go to Paranormal Addicts Podcast on Facebook or TikTok. We're live during season 3, we're live 2 Thursdays a month. Then season 4 kicks off in January with Bill Murphy. And in season 4, we'll be on Sundays. And we're live on YouTube and Facebook. And then the next day on everywhere you podcast. Everywhere. So, and then I stay very active. Yeah, right now I'm inactive because of knee surgery. But starting in August, I am heading to Smoky Mountain Terror, Investigation, West Kentucky Point Memorial Expo, Rock Island Expo, Investigation. I'm ending the year in one of my bucket list locations, the Hinsdale House. Excited about that. So yeah, just KenTenn Paranormal or Kent Wilson on Facebook are the easiest place to find us. And I actually, my current newest project is I actually have some paranormal equipment coming out. I have my own line of REM pod based equipment. It's actually called Not a REM pod. And Not a REM pod technology by Costronics, Chaos by Kent. They're going to be under $50, and they're going to be available by the end of the month. So, get you one of those because it's important to me. It's important to have quality equipment affordable for investigators. I don't think it should be important how much money you have and how good of an investigator you are. I don't think that should be a question. When I started out with a tape recorder, one of the big Casio ones like you got in the library. I started out with that, a flashlight, and a notebook and pen. So it's not about, honestly, I think one of the issues with the paranormal field right now is investigators rely too much on equipment. But so affordable equipment, we have not a REM pod already. We're getting ready to have not a K2 meter. We're getting ready to have, we're going to keep everything affordable. We're going to have not a flex thermal imager, so everything's going to be $100 or less. So check that out.
Perfect. And I know that once that comes out, I don't want to go another year without talking to you. Let's bring you back on the show here in a few more months. Your new book should be out by then. Your line of equipment should be out by then. Let's talk about it, and let's see how it works. And let's talk more about, well, I'm sure you're going to be out there investigating as well. Let's see what happens afterwards and bring you back.
Sounds good.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.